operate in the Indo-Pacific today. Can you talk about why this is a better decision from a national security perspective?
Well, Senator, let me thank you and the entire state delegation for what you did in exercising leadership on this important issue. We really appreciate it. You hit the nail on the head when you quoted me regarding the fact that this was conceived in the 1940s, and it served a specific purpose at that point in time. It doesn't necessarily support the way that we operate today. We're much further forward in theater. We operate in a dispersed fashion. Our logistical support ought to mirror that, ought to enable our operations, and so I felt that it was important to make sure that we had our reserves positioned appropriately to support our operations going forward here. And that's what drove my decision, in conjunction with the fact that I'm very concerned about the health and welfare of our troops, our families, and the people of Hawaii as well. So.
Thank you. As you know, we're in the implementation phase of the decision that you came to. The third-party assessment wrapped up last week. I know it's going to take some time at the Office of the Secretary and the Cape to kind of come to some final conclusions. I have a very specific question pertinent to the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, which is that you got the third-party assessment coming in. Now you're in process, sort of final phases, maybe 10-yard line. But we need a number if we're going to not miss a whole fiscal year's worth of progress. And so I'm wondering where you are in that process and how quickly you can turn that third-party assessment into a requirement so that we can consider it as a subcommittee.
Well, thanks, Senator. The Navy is reviewing that report, all 880 pages of it, and that will inform their approach to recommending how we should go about defueling the facility. So, to your point, I'm waiting on the Navy to come back with its specific plan for defueling, and I expect to get that at the end of the month.
Okay, so in time for us to consider a number.
I certainly hope so, Senator.
Okay, thank you. I want to use my final minute and a half for the Compact of Free Association negotiations. Admiral Aquilino's posture plans for the Indo-Pacific rely, at least in part, on maintaining access to compact states, Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and Palau. Can you talk about the importance of these compact states to DOD's mission in the Pacific?
They're very important. We always aim to be the partner of choice, and I think our continued engagement with them will certainly result in additional capability and capacity as we go forward. So I think the combatant commander is doing a great job in terms of continued engagement. But again, our goal is to make sure that we are the partner of choice, and so far I'm very encouraged by what we're seeing.
Just a bit about the interagency process here. As you know, you have the Department of Interior through the Office of through the Secretary for Insular Affairs, and then you have the Department of State as sort of lead negotiator. But DOD is right there, and to a certain extent, although you're a silent partner in terms of the nuts and bolts of the negotiation, you're the biggest deal in the negotiation. So what I'd like you to consider is appointing someone specifically to be in the room for even the preliminary negotiations. Again, states got a lead on this, but having DOD at the table makes an enormous difference for compact states in terms of conveying to these compact states how important they are to us.
Well, as Chairman pointed out at the top of the meeting here, Secretary Blinken and I are great partners, and certainly I'm sure that this will be what he will want to see as well. And we will continue to work with the entire interagency to make sure that we're in the right place here. So.
Great. Thank you.
Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all so much for all that you do and for you being here today. Both of your testimonies highlight the importance of integrated deterrence for aligning department policies, resources, and activities to strengthen deterrence. An essential part of this is bolstering of our allies and partners to better deter our adversaries General Milley, as you mentioned in your testimony, the U.S. must continue to strengthen our relationships by building our partners' capabilities to deter our adversaries. Recently, several European allies have stated their intent to purchase the F-35 fighter jet. Would Poland, Finland, and Germany having F-35s be helpful to our national security and deterrence against Russia and Europe? And going further, given the current situation in your best training so they can receive the F-35s as soon as possible?
I do, and I think, first of all, it's an excellent capability. Secondly, I think interoperability with our allies is important, and I think the strength of the alliance is critical to the deterrence of any broader land conflict on the European continent.
Thank you, sir. Pre-positioned stocks are essential for the rapid mobilization and equipping of units during time of crisis. As you know, the Army activated its pre-positioned stocks in March of this year as the conflict in Ukraine escalated for the first in an unplanned contingency. I was happy to learn that these pre-positioned stocks allow an armor brigade combat team to deploy from the U.S. to Eastern Europe faster than Russian forces advanced from Belarus to Kiev. Understanding that pre-positioned stocks require military construction support and being the ranking member on the Military Construction Subcommittee, does the U.S. have pre-positioned stocks to respond to potential threats in the Pacific from China, outside of Japan and South Korea? Are there any plans to establish pre-positioned stocks? Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for what you did several years ago to enable what you just described in Europe there. The European Defense Initiative really laid the groundwork for, the pre-positioned stocks and some of the facilities that we use there. As you'll see, in terms of what we're investing in with the Pacific Deterrent Initiative, we are investing in infrastructure and a number of other things to ensure that we have capability further forward in the theater. So that's our goal, to make sure that we have that ability in the Indo-Pacific to a greater degree in the future.
Well, to follow up on that, our missile stockpiles are being stretched thin after years of producing at minimum rate of sustainment and increased demand resulting from the U.S. current efforts to bolster our Ukrainian defense. I think are stretching that very, very thin. I'm hearing from industry some of the challenges they face with trying to increase production rates while shortening lead times. How critical is it to maintain these stockpiles, and in what ways can the committee support you and industry to help ramp up production efforts to meet demand and replenish our stockpiles?
Well, it's very critical to make sure that we maintain what we consider to be our minimum required stockage levels. And you can rest assured that I will not allow us to go below that in critical munitions. We have met with industry. I think you saw us do this fairly early on and encourage them to work with us to begin to open up production lines to increase their production, and they are doing that. They're leaning forward. In some cases, a little bit more difficult to do than others, but industry has been very supportive, and so we'll continue to work with them. We'll continue to identify things that we need from you if a need arises. But to this point, I think we're in pretty good shape, and industry is responding.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Austin, welcome. A healthy defense industrial base is a critical element for our national security. And President Biden issued an executive order in January of 2021 to strengthen Buy America requirements for all federal programs. In July, a notice of proposed rulemaking increased the domestic content requirement from 55% to 60%, with a phased-in increase to 75%. This is a move I strongly support. However, I know from the experience with the Navy's new frigate that if we require 100% American-made, within a reasonable timeline, industry can step up and deliver. With the frigate, this actually resulted in the onshoring of new U.S. manufacturing. So do you support replicating this success for other defense programs with the goal of hitting 100% American-made, so long as the department has reasonable timelines and reasonable waivers at their disposal?
Yeah, I absolutely support making sure that where we can, we invest in America, that we make sure that we have the supply lines available to do the things that you just described. And so you're right. The president has an initiative that he launched a while back, and DoD is a strong partner in that initiative to ensure that we strengthen our supply lines, that we make sure that we have the critical materials available to build and the types of munitions and platforms that we think we'll need going forward. So yes, I support that. So.
Thank you. General Milley, I understand you had a version of this question asked already, so I'm going to try to take it in a little bit different direction. But Ukraine has far exceeded most expectations over 2 months into this most recent phase of Putin's war. I support providing the Ukrainians with the capabilities that they need to defend their sovereignty, and hope that we can quickly pass a Ukraine supplemental that fulfills President Biden's request. It's clear that this conflict may extend for some time. As you talk with Ukrainian counterparts, I know you've been asked what a realistic end state is for Ukraine. I'd like to ask a little differently is what does a realistic military success or end state look like for the United States? And how will our security assistance need to change at this new phase in order to support those goals?
Thanks, Senator. The end state has been articulated by the President, Secretary of Defense, Secretary Blinken, several different times. And what it is maintain the cohesion of NATO, make sure that Ukraine at the end of the day ends up as a free sovereign nation with the territorial integrity intact, no kinetic war between NATO and the United States and Russia, so no action between our military forces specifically, and continue to support the Ukrainian people with what they need to defend themselves. So that's what we're trying to do. And we need to, at the end of the day, what's it all about? It's all about the rules-based international order has been grossly violated by Russia with an illegal, aggressive action by military forces across the sovereign border. We have had a set of institutions in place for 78 consecutive years to prevent that very thing from happening, and that's what's at stake. It's beyond Ukraine is what's at stake, and our intent is to maintain and uphold the rules-based international order by achieving those specific objectives the President's given us.
Thank you. Secretary Austin, on this topic, some analysts believe that the more we assist Ukraine in degrading Putin's military, the more likely he will be to escalate to new levels, possibly with chemical, biological, or even tactical nuclear weapons. Can you clarify how this might change the calculus that General Milley was just outlining in terms of use of force from the U.S. military?
Yeah, there are a number of things that Mr. Putin could do. You could make the case, by the way, Senator, that he's already escalated in terms of the types of things that we see him doing in attacking civilians, destroying cities, towns, and villages, indiscriminate targeting. Certainly, he has a number of things that he could do. He could, escalate by conducting a cyber event, or there's been a lot of talk about the possible employment of chem bio. Of course, if he employs a chemical, biological, or weapon, I think he will see a reaction from the international community, and because that's a pretty serious step. And of course, President Biden's been clear about his views on this. So it's possible that he could do that. I certainly hope that he chooses to not do that. Again, I think the international response will be significant. But Senator, he could end this war today.
Yes.
He chose. This is a war of choice. He could choose to stop fighting and withdraw his forces from Ukraine. And again, this is the decision of one man. And so I would hope that Mr. Putin would decide to do something different going forward.
Yes, and I just want to close with, should Putin continue to escalate, is it your expectation that the administration would come to Congress requesting an authorization for use of military force?
That's a policy decision that my boss will make, and so I won't get in front of my boss. So.
Senator Blunt.
Thank you, Chairman. And thanks to both of you for your current and your long service to the country. I'm deeply appreciative, as I'm sure we all are. Secretary Austin, I think McKinsey had a report out last year that indicated that from 2000 to 2021, the defense cost index, the inflation index, ran about 20 points ahead of the CPI during that period of time. Do you think this budget will reflect the world we're in now in terms of replenishing our stock and getting ready for the future? It's about a 5% increase in a inflationary economy. It seemed to me we may not be holding our own, let alone moving forward here.
Well, thanks, Senator. Before I answer that question, let me thank you for your service tremendous service to our country and to the Senate. So, and thanks for your support of the military on behalf of the entire Department of Defense. As I said earlier, when we crafted this budget, we built the budget based upon our strategy. And at that point, you have to make assumptions about levels of inflation, and so we use the appropriate number, what we believe to be the appropriate number at that time. And things have changed now, so there is a difference. Yeah.
Well, that's helpful, and I'm sure we're going to be discussing that more with the secretaries as they come in. So it's helpful I missed your observation about that, and I think it's helpful to know that that's where you are now. A number of things have changed, and one is we have and intend to provide our Ukrainian friends with a lot more things to fight with. Does this budget at this point anticipate replacing the Javelins or the Stinger missiles that we have given or will give to them?
It is a substantial budget, in my view, Senator, and it allows us to go after the things that we need to have to support our warfighting concepts and that are outlined in our strategy here. Again, China is listed as our pacing challenge. Russia is listed as an acute threat. The supplementals that you provided us to this point have been very helpful in going after the kinds of things that you mentioned. And again, this next supplemental that the President has asked for your support on will enable us to do what you just described, replenish stocks, and also continue to support Ukraine. But the supplemental funds are really focused on that.
Well, to pursue that just a little bit more, I think we've roughly provided roughly 5,000 Javelins and 1,400 Stingers. The Javelins, that's about a third of our stockpile already provided, and the Stingers about 25% of our stockpile. Is it possible to replace a third of our stockpile, or let's say 50% before we're done here within a year?
It certainly is. It's not only possible, but we will do that. We will never go below our minimum requirement for our stockpile. So we will always maintain the capability to defend this country and support our interests. But this will help us to not only replenish our stockpiles, but also replace some of the capability that we've asked our partners and allies to provide. Some of the eastern flank countries early on provided Stingers, and other countries provided Javelins upon our request, and so it'll help us do that.
Well, I know we'll want to work with you on that. General Milley, let me get in one more question here. I know you're a great student of warfare, and my guess is we've all learned a lot in the last 3 months of assumptions prior to what's happened in Ukraine and what we've seen happen in terms of effectiveness of force or the weapons that are most effective we're seeing in that theater of war. Does this budget yet reflect what you think the next budget should probably reflect in terms of our transition to be sure we're keeping up with the lessons we're learning from modern warfare?
It does. It moves us in the right direction for sure. This has got the most research and development of any budget in NDA history, actually, and it's a very significant movement into the future. And as we look at what's happening in Ukraine, or for example in Mosul or Syria, what we're seeing is some fundamental change in the character of war that is going to lead into the future. One of those changes is highly dense urban area combat. You saw the Battle of Kyiv, for example, and the Russian failure there. You're seeing the ubiquitous use of precision munitions. You're seeing the use of drones, for example, and unmanned aerial vehicles. You're seeing the very effective use of air defense systems, both SAMs and MANPADS, to deny the Russians the airspace. And the most effective weapon they've used so far has been anti-tank weapons. And of course, Javelin is what we have, but many of the countries are providing all kinds of NLAWs and Carl Gustavs and RPGs, a wide variety of anti-tank weapons. So the combination of all of that together has led the Russians to not achieve the successes that they thought they would have. And those have direct application, and I think this budget takes into account. But beyond that, this budget also is investing in artificial intelligence, robotics, most of which we're not really seeing in the current battlefield. But we do expect those to be very, very significant players in a future battle, 20, 30 years from now, something like that. Those are going to be dominant technologies at that time. And this budget takes us on that path.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to both of you for being here today. Secretary Austin, I want to commend you. I want to commend the work that you have done so far to get Ukraine the equipment and support they need to fight back against Russia's unforgivable attack on their country. And at the same time, I'm glad we're starting to provide more capable systems. And I really urge you to increase those deliveries and provide all the necessary training so Ukrainian forces do have everything they need. Now, I have heard repeatedly from people on the front lines and those involved in the logistics system in Ukraine about equipment that we deliver not reaching frontline units that most need the weapons and ammunition and body armor. There seems to be a number of logistical and institutional issues, including some diversion and hoarding, which are standing in the way. So I wanted to ask you today, what is your assessment of those issues, and how are you working with Ukraine to make distribution of international assistance more transparent and effective so the units on the front lines actually get the equipment that they need?
Well, thank you, Senator. This is something that's very important to us at the department and to me and General Milley specifically. And we talk to our counterparts on a weekly basis. And without fail, this is a question that I ask about. We don't have people on the ground to be able to provide accurate feedback on how this equipment is moving and whether or not it's getting to where it's needed most. But the report that we get back from the senior leadership routinely is that it's getting to where it needs to go. But, I won't stop. I'll continue to engage and make sure that we emphasize that it's important that all the stuff we're giving them gets to the right place so that they can be successful. And in addition to that, when I engaged the senior leadership in Kyiv last week, I emphasized the importance of accountability as well. And they acknowledge that this is something that's important and something that they're focused on. Again, without people on the ground to be able to confirm or deny, it's very, very difficult to do at this point. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. Turning to home, Secretary Austin, in January, I and many of my colleagues sent you a letter regarding DOD oversight of privatized housing after Balfour Beatty communities pled guilty to defrauding the government. The department's response provided few meaningful answers on how oversight is actually going to improve, and that really needs to change. And on top of that, as you probably know, just a few days ago, the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations released a report showing that after the period covered by the DOJ investigation, Balfour Beatty continued to fail to remediate mold, failed to make critical repairs, and falsified information in the database DOD uses to calculate their incentive fee. That is really outrageous and really completely unacceptable. In my home state of Washington, Balfour Beatty continues to obstruct building sufficient housing at Fairchild, and along with the shortage of housing in the community where BAH fails to keep up with rent prices, that means that military families are left without housing. Some have been stuck living in out of RVs for months now. And at Joint Base Lewis McChord, dozens of families have sued Lincoln Military Housing over really deplorable living conditions. Our service members should have access to the best, or at least decent housing, not the worst. Now, we all want to fix this as soon as possible. This budget requests almost $168 million for military housing privatization support. That is $45 million more than last year. Can you tell me, first, what are military families getting out of this funding increase? And secondly, what is your assessment of the private housing companies' compliance since the plea agreement? And will you hold them accountable for such horrendous abusive conduct?
To your last question first, yes, I will hold them accountable, and I expect the service secretaries to hold them accountable as well. And, you know, the health and welfare of our troops, our families, is very, very important to us. And, you know, we put a great deal of emphasis on this, but, you know, obviously, this is something that we can never take our eyes off of, and we're not there yet. We put more resources into the budget so we can provide more and higher quality housing. But we're going to have to hold the contractors accountable, and we intend to do that. I intend to do that. So,
what are the military families getting out of the funding increase that's being requested?
it'll be, of course, it's spread out over a number of different projects, but it'll be more and better housing, so higher quality housing.
Okay, well, we've been told this for a long time, and we're still seeing these deplorable conditions and the ongoing really substandard housing and the challenges that our families are having. So this needs a lot of work and oversight, and we have got to stay up on top of it. I want to know that you're going to be doing that.
I will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your service to our nation. In your written testimony, you both mentioned that our adversaries are rapidly developing hypersonic missiles. As hypersonics become more commonplace, it seems we can't rely upon nuclear deterrence alone to prevent hypersonic attacks. Once hypersonic interceptors are developed, how do we plan on deploying these defensive capabilities around the globe to make certain that our deployed troops are sufficiently protected from attack? And what shifts do you expect to see in missile and interceptor investment in future years, the U.S. company as the U.S. Competes with China?
Well, hypersonics is important to us, and in this budget, I think you've seen, Senator, that we're investing some $7.2 billion in long-range fires. $4.7 billion of that is focused on hypersonics. And so we continue to develop capability for ourselves, but what's important is that we need to consider the mix, the range of capabilities, the mix of capabilities that we're going to bring on board to support our warfighting concepts. So hypersonics is an important capability, but there are other things that add to this equation as well. In terms of defending ourselves, this is a priority for me, and as soon as we came on board, I tasked my staff to make sure that we pulled the right elements together to make sure that we were pressing forward rapidly to increase our efforts in developing our defenses against the hypersonic threat. You've seen us engage industry on this issue, and we'll continue to press. But you know, we've made some progress, but we have a ways to go yet. So.
What concerns do you have about the hypersonics weapons workforce? What do we need to do to be training and preparing ourselves? What kind of investment in our workforce is necessary?
In our
Private sector workforce.
Well, certainly, we've engaged we've engaged industry and asked them to pick up the pace. And in terms of what they need specifically in their workforce elements, that's something that we haven't discussed. But again, I think the issue to this point has been, we've not pushed to the degree that we can push, and we've not invested to the degree that we can invest. And so we invested in this last year, we invested in it this year, and we're going to continue to press.
Thank you. Let me shift natures of my question. I had the opportunity to review and sit down with staff from the Inspector General's office to discuss their November 21 report evaluating the department's implementation of suicide prevention resources for transitioning members. We know from our work on the Veterans Committee that the most vulnerable time for many members of our military is they are leaving active duty and becoming veterans. That Inspector General's report demonstrates a lack of compliance with Executive Order 13822 regarding mental health screenings and the warm handoff to mental health care for transitioning service members. It continues to be troubling to me that this does not seem to receive the attention that it deserves within our military community. Can you share with me, either one of you, what progress the department is making in implementing the Inspector General's recommendations from that November 21 report?
What I can tell you, Senator, is that, and you've heard me say this a number of times, that this is important to me, this is important to our department, and this is why we've invested in suicide prevention, in mental health, in a major way this year. We've invested in it last year as well. But this year, we're investing $1.4 billion in mental health efforts. We continue to liaise and engage with our counterparts in the VA to ensure that we can close, as much as possible, close the gap as troops transition from active duty to leaving the service or going in any direction. So I've also stood up an independent review committee to address this issue and give us further insights in mental health issues and also prevention of suicide. And so we're investing in this in a major way.
I intended to pursue this further in NDAA, and I look forward to your cooperation as we figure out what language instructions might be valuable to the department to see that gap that you just described is closed. Okay. Thank you.
Before I get to Senator Durbin, I just want to add to Senator Moran's question on the transition. We have work to do, and I know you guys aren't necessarily in the position to deal with pushing people out. You want to keep them in, but it is apparent that this is a pretty massive problem, and it's both active military and VA. So I want to thank Senator Moran for that line of questioning. Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here. General Milley, as well as Secretary Austin, thank you for what you're doing today and your years of service to our country. And so those of us who've been in the business of military politics over a period of time are considered to be wise forecasters of what's going to happen. And sometimes we are, and sometimes we aren't. I can recall the early briefing on what we might expect in Ukraine when the Russian troops were all poised at the border. And if I remember it correctly, the prediction was that the city of Kyiv would fall in a matter of days, and that major parts of Ukraine would fall to the Russians as well. Then they would find that the maintenance of order in, quote, conquered territory would be extremely difficult, and they would face a resistance for a long period of time. I remember that prediction as we all watched reality unfold. Kyiv today, thank goodness, is still not in the hands of the Russians, though it's under attack, I'm sure. And most of Ukraine has not been conquered by Russia, thank goodness. And they are apparently having a difficult time hanging on to what they currently have and are fighting to extend their reach every day. And I just wonder, we can assess it in many different ways, but certainly the courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people, first and foremost, is the reason for what we see. At least I think so. And I wonder what we've learned about Russia's military strength and what we anticipated they would deliver in the field and what they actually delivered. And I know it's been asked earlier by Senator Baldwin, but a declaration of war, what would that mean in terms of Putin's capabilities in extending his military reach in Ukraine? Secretary Austin.
Yeah, with your permission, I'll take I'll answer first, and if you want the chairman to respond as well, sir, certainly we'd offer that. We have learned a lot about Russia's leadership at the lower levels, which I think has been very, very key in this in their efforts here. They have modern equipment. They have lots of it. They have a doctrine that that really wasn't followed, and so as we saw things unfold on the ground, we saw them not able to support themselves logistically. We saw them make some bad assumptions at the very beginning of this. We saw them fail to integrate aerial fires with their ground maneuver, and just a number of missteps. And I attribute a lot of that to lack of leadership at the lower level. And we saw Russia push its senior officers forward as a result of that, and many of those were killed from being forward on the battlefield. We'll see some of the same mistakes, some of the same weaknesses as they prosecute the fight in the Donbass and in the southern part of the country. But they will learn from the lessons learn from what they did in the early stages of this fight. And we'll see them improve their logistical efforts, and we'll see them improve their massing of fires and that sort of business. But some things they won't be able to correct. So we've learned a lot about their leadership at the lower levels and their level of training.
I'd like General Milley to respond, but there was a suggestion that if declaration of war took place, something would happen automatically under Russian law of a conscription. And that suggests to me, as a civilian, that a lot of untrained men in this circumstance might be called into training and exercises that they aren't prepared for, they haven't been conditioned for. That doesn't seem like it would be an immediate boost to their effort.
That's exactly right, Senator. He would be able to mobilize more people, but to adequately train those people to be more effective than what we've seen on the battlefield thus far, that's questionable.
General Milley, if you'd respond to that question that I've asked earlier, and if you'd also add to your comments, since I'm running out of time, I have a particular concern about Poland and the Baltics, and they worry every step of the way of extension of Russian aggression into their region. I hope you'll address that in your comments.
Just very, very briefly, Senator. Declaration of war does have some implications inside Russian society legally. As the Secretary said, it would allow them to mobilize additional forces, but again, training, et cetera, how long it would take for them to get to the front. In terms of the lessons learned, leadership is clearly the key, from Zelensky on down to the lowest private. And as Napoleon taught us a long time ago, moral is to the physical as 3 is to 1. So they are capable. That is probably the most important difference right now between the Russians and the Ukrainians, is the leadership throughout the levels. In addition to that, it's what the Western nations, NATO and particularly the United States, taught their leaders since 2014 about mission command. The Ukrainians are practicing a decentralized, intent-based set of tactics. The Russians are practicing a top-down, very, very top-heavy, directive in nature sort of set of orders coming from the top, which is not necessarily the best thing to do in a dynamic battlefield. The second thing is the effective use of anti-tank weapons has been phenomenal on the part of the Ukrainians. Third is the denial of the airspace, air supremacy and air superiority to the Russians by the Ukrainians, and the effective use of ground air defense systems. Terrain has played to the Ukrainian favor. Intelligence is really important. The Ukrainians have a built-in intelligence system, being the people. So the Russians have walked into an area that is clearly unwelcome to them, and the people have provided a massive amount of intelligence. Plus, we have opened up the pipes, which I'm not going to go into detail here in an open hearing, but there's a significant amount of intelligence flowing to Ukraine from the United States. All of that in combination and many, many more are some of the early lessons learned that have made the difference as what you've seen. In terms of predictions, those were early assessments, and war is a dynamic interaction between competing wills. So between those predictions that you heard in early February and January, a lot of things happened on that battlefield in preparation prior to the invasion on the 24th, not the least of which is an intelligence flow from the United States. And that made a significant difference in outcomes.
Poland and the Baltics.
And Poland and the Balkans. So Poland is
Baltics.
yeah, Poland is clearly, you know, these are all NATO Article 5 allies. As you know, the United States, under the direction of the President, Secretary of Defense, we went ahead and directed U.S. troops. So right now you have U.S. troops in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Hungary, all the entire belt has U.S. troops in there. And that was done immediately in order to reinforce the NATO Article 5 deterrence posture of the United States and to assure our allies that they're not going to be left alone. So that is a critical component, as the President has said many, many times, as members of Congress have said many, many times. Article 5 matters. It's a Senate-ratified treaty, and the United States will not give up. Will protect every inch of NATO territory.
Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for coming. General Austin, this budget request, is it a 4% increase?
Yes, from last year's.
Okay. What's the inflation rate?
Current inflation rate is well above that. So.
Okay. So this budget doesn't keep up with inflation, number one. Percentage of GDP spent on defense, what percentage does this budget represent?
I think it's 3.1.
Okay. How many times have we been below 3% since World War II?
I don't know, Senator.
Well, you need to look it up. 1940, 1999, 2000, 2001. In the 10-year window, the fiscal year defense plan in year 10, 2032, what percentage of GDP will be spent on defense?
In the 10-year window?
Yeah, FY 32. The trajectory we're on, where will we be in FY 32?
We should be a bit above where we are right now.
Now we're at 2.4% if the numbers I've been given are right. So over time, we spend less historically than we've ever spent. And given the 10 years that I'm looking at, I don't see a real peace dividend out there. How many current battle force ships do we have in the Navy?
It's, I think it's
We have 296.
293.
We have 11 aircraft carriers. How many ships does China have?
I think the latest number was around 400.
Yeah, 355. They're going to 422 by the end of, 460 by 2030. Where will we be in terms of ships by the end of 2032? U.S. ships. It's 280. So the bottom line is we're on the wrong path here, from my humble opinion. We're spending below inflation. The Chinese are increasing their Navy. By 2032, we'll have, these numbers are right, we'll have 280 ships below what we have today. GDP spent on defense will be at 2.4%. I don't know what kind of world we're looking at out there, but you're seeing a different world than I am. And I hope we, in a bipartisan way, can correct this, because I think in really many ways this is dangerous. Afghanistan. General Milley, I think you and Secretary Austin said last year that we could expect in the next 2 to 3 years threats to the American homeland emerge from Afghanistan. Is that still accurate?
I still believe that to be a correct assessment, yes.
Has it moved one way or the other?
We're seeing initial indications, as you have seen in the media as well, and you're privy to some of the intelligence, which I won't go over here, but ISIS and other groups are trying to put themselves back together. They have not succeeded yet, and they have not yet presented a threat to the U.S. homeland, but we are watching that very, very closely. And if they raise their head and do present a threat, then we'll take appropriate action.
Is our over-the-horizon capability to just monitor Afghanistan sufficient?
I think we have room to improve, to be sure. We do have
I don't want to do
over-the-horizon
anything
capability.
right, unclassified here, but our ISR presence in Afghanistan, I think you'll be shocked to know what it is and where it's headed. To both of you, you advocated for troops to remain in Afghanistan. Is that correct? It's the president's decision, but that was the position of both of you. Is that correct?
I want to be clear, Senator, I support the president's decision.
I know, but the recommendation you gave, I want to be clear, was it would be better off to have a residual force. Is that accurate?
And sir, you know, I will never convey what I say.
Well, the record's replete with the fact that it was, and I just want to compliment you both. I'm trying to compliment you here that I thought that was the right decision, that pulling everybody out of Afghanistan was a mistake. Do you believe that our withdrawal from Afghanistan made it more likely that Putin would invade Ukraine?
I think that President Putin made his decision to invade Ukraine long before we pulled out of Afghanistan, to be very, very candid.
Why didn't he do it before?
Why didn't he do it before?
Yeah.
I think he was preparing the force. Last year, he ran a very, very large exercise and in getting the force ready.
Why did they invade Crimea when they did?
In 2014?
Yeah.
I can't answer that question right
Well,
now. I think it's because
I've got a theory here.
Say again?
That, with all due respect, that Afghanistan sent the worst possible signal to our adversaries and our allies. President Biden and Secretary Blinken have said they have no regrets regarding our withdrawal from Afghanistan. Secretary Austin, do you have any regrets?
Senator, as I said, I support the president's decision.
Okay.
And again, you know,
What about you, General Milley?
I deeply regret the loss of 13, 11 Marines, 1 sailor, and 1
But
soldier.
yeah, I do too. I regret the loss of everybody we've lost over there and all the wounded. But do you have any regrets in terms of our national security that maybe we made the wrong decision?
Senator, I'm a soldier, and I execute the decisions that I'm told to make. And I don't think at this point it's helpful for me to express regret or not. I execute
Fair
the
enough.
mission.
So I want to work with you both. Chairman Durbin's been great on Ukraine. We want to do more, not less. We want to send a signal we're in it to win it. And I appreciate the robust response. It's getting better every day. So thank you both. In terms of the budget before us is inadequate to the threats we face, and over time is a disaster, and I'd like to fix it. Thank you.
Senator Hoeven.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Question for both of you. What weapon systems does Ukraine need and need the most and need the soonest that they don't have?
what they've asked for, Senator, is long-range fire capability, and we're providing that, as you've seen, with most recently 90 155 systems.
And they're capable of using them, or do they need to be trained on them?
They're using them now. They're using them as we speak. As you may know, we took a number of troops out and trained them up very quickly on 155s, put them back into action, and they are employing those weapon systems now. They have the ammunition that we're providing them, and other countries are providing them 155 capability as well. They've also asked for armor capability, tanks and armored vehicles, and countries in the region are providing that. As we witnessed in our meeting that we held in Ramstein a week ago, countries like Canada and Germany are stepping up, providing armored vehicle capability, and so their capability overall is increasing. And again, they put the stuff that we provided them to very good use, in addition to the UAVs that we're also providing.
General, same question?
Yeah, same thing, Senator. I talk to my counterpart literally every other day, and we work very, very hard to get him what he thinks he needs. Long-range fires, specifically cannon artillery and rocket artillery. They were used to using the old Soviet model 152 artillery. Ammunition became a problem, so we're moving to a NATO standard. So the United States and many of our allies and partners are providing him with multiple battalions worth of 155 cannon and the ammunition to go with it, plus the radars, plus the fire direction center, the entire package for effective use of fires. That's the most important thing right now in the current fight. Secondly is to continue to sustain him on anti-tank weapons, very effective, anti-aircraft weapons, ground-based, either SAMs and or man-pads. Those are probably the top three, and then the number four would be his ground maneuver capability of tanks and mech infantry vehicles, which many countries are now helping to contribute as well. So those would be the top four. There's a whole laundry list below that, but those are the top four.
Looking at what the Ukrainians have done to the Russian tanks with our javelins, do we have something that is going to ensure that the tanks we provide are able to defeat that same type of shoulder-mounted threat and truly be effective?
The tanks that have been provided to them, Senator, have been tanks that they're accustomed to using, and that they have the maintenance capabilities to maintain. So we've seen tanks, a number of tanks being provided by countries like Poland and others that are in the neighborhood, and again. Russians don't have something that approaches the Javelin, okay. So that's...
All right. So then, next question. Have we fully utilized the funds that we've already provided such that you need this, and when do you need this supplemental? And have we really focused on the lethal aid versus getting other things in this $33 billion supplemental?
Yeah, we absolutely have focused on the lethal aid, Senator, and we're at the very end of our drawdown capability here. You know, we're very quickly going to run out of funds. So.
Okay. General, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it's clear to me that the monies that Congress has provided is overwhelmingly in support of lethal aid. There's no question about it. It's almost all lethal aid, actually.
I'm switching gears here, more along the lines of Senator Graham. Are you both, this is a question for both of you, are you both fully committed to upgrading, updating, and modernizing our nuclear triad, and is the funding in this budget adequate to do that?
$34 billion allocated to that effort in this budget. And yes, Senator, I am absolutely fully committed to modernizing the triad.
100%. It's the number one priority in this budget, and it'll have to be sustained over time in future budgets. But that has ensured the protection of the United States for many, many years, and we need to reinvest and recapitalize it. It's number one.
Thank you. I appreciate that and agree 100%. Final question. Are you familiar with Sky Range, for developing the Sky Range system to test hypersonics as a way to actually do it rather than lining up naval ships and trying to do it? And do you support it, including using the Global Hawks for that purpose?
I am familiar with it, Senator, and yes, I do support it. And again, the Air Force will continue to work to make sure that the right capabilities are in place to support that effort.
Same.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you both for your leadership. We appreciate it at all times, but certainly at these very, very difficult and challenging times. I want to just follow on Senator Hovind's comments about hypersonics. We are in a unique position, as you know, in Alaska, in providing the only location of supporting both short and long-range hypersonic weapons testing within the country, just because of where we are with the unique geographic location. Nobody in the way down there for the most part. And I know that this is something that, General Milley, you have spoken a lot about with regards to China's hypersonic weapons testing ability. Just very briefly, whether or not you're looking at the solutions for this in terms of opportunity for testing.
Yes.
In conjunction with our spaceport there in Kodiak as the short
Short answer is yes, and hypersonics are an important weapon in an entire array of weapon systems. As you know, the Russians have already fired hypersonic weapons in Ukraine. I do want to caveat that, though, but it is, the key to it is in its name. It is very, very fast, and there's no effective defensive weapon against it per se, to shoot it down. So the key, as Senator Moran had asked earlier, the key is to shoot the archer, not the arrow, and to get at the system at its launch sites. The other key from protection standpoint is not only the integrated air missile ballistic defense system, but it's also the tactics of the units. So units are going to have to be, as we move into this changing character of war in the future, units and organizations and equipment are going to have to be smaller, faster, much more hidden in the sense of not quite totally invisible, probably never get there, but we need to be very, very difficult to find on a battlefield. So a constant state of moving in motion, invisible to the extent that's possible, smaller in general, and speed will matter on future battlefields because so far what we've seen with hypersonics is they're very effective against fixed targets, much more difficult against moving targets.
Let me ask about the javelins. You're just speaking about that with Senator Hoeven, Mr. Secretary. And we've been working with a constituent of mine. He's an Army Special Forces vet. He's been in Ukraine training ground forces for the past couple months. He has facilitated several requirements letters from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense verifying the need for Javelin training kits, including the head of Ukrainian Defense Intelligence. I understand these documents have been pushed to your office. Obviously, the Javelins have the ability to significantly help Ukrainian forces, but what we're hearing is that the new Ukrainian troops are not provided adequate training to operate these $200,000 weapons systems. I was looking at an article that came out just a week ago now with regards to the training aspect of it. So the question to you is whether or not, A, they have enough of the Javelins that they need, but what we are doing to help facilitate then the training so that they can most effectively deploy these weapons, and what is DoD telling the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense in response to their ask for more trainers? How are we doing on that side?
First of all, thank you, Senator. I would highlight that we have taken, at this point, several hundred troops out of Ukraine, trained them in other countries on artillery, operation of UAVs, and other things, and they've been reintroduced into the fight. So training is something that we're doing, but the issue is that in my engagements with the Minister of Defense, and I think also with the Chief of Defense and the Chairman, the issue of specific issue of training on Javelins has never come up. But if they raise that issue, certainly we stand ready to train them. If it is a requirement, and since you brought it up, no doubt it is, we'll go back and check with them again. And the people that they need to train, we stand ready to train them. And we're pushing training kits into country as well.
I will be happy to follow up and provide you with the information that we have on this, and I thank you for that. Then just very lastly, and this doesn't require a response, but this is with regards to Arctic operations. You'd be disappointed if I didn't raise it with you, but I am thankful that you have stressed the importance of supporting Arctic operations, the training, the equipment of our joint forces in this important region. I know you've got good progress that we have made with regards to the Ted Stevens Arctic Security Studies Center in Alaska, the first Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Arctic Affairs. You've got Northcom tasked with an Arctic security assessment, so there's a lot coming on in this way. I understand there's a report coming up. We'll look forward to reviewing that and being there to support you in all those efforts, but truly appreciate the heightened level of engagement in this very important part of our responsibility. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Murkowski. I'm going to take my question time now. Fellows, we've been at this for about an hour and 37 minutes, which is a little longer than I had anticipated, but it's a big budget, and it's worth every question to be asked. And I just want to start by thanking you guys for what you're doing. I mean, the truth is $700 to $73 billion. You're going to have people come in saying it's too much. You're going to have people coming in saying it's too little. As you've already pointed out, Secretary, you have to snap the shock line somewhere. That's a good analogy. And I just appreciate the work that you've done, because Anybody can pick holes in it. Anybody can pick holes in it. And to talk about where we're going to be in the next decade, 10 years from now, is pretty interesting, because you have to have people around you nimble enough to know whether we're even going to need ships or tanks, or if it's going to be fought in outer space, or if it's going to be fought in the cyber realm, wherever it's going to be fought. And the truth is, if you screw up, we're all going to have opinions and we're going to beat the crap out of you. And so you've got to do what's best for this country and best for the people who are served under you. And I just want to thank you for that. Talking about the area of decommissioning, divesting, it's always a challenge. You've always got people in the Senate that don't want to see certain things go away. But I want to talk about a proposal to get rid of ships that, quite frankly, we just put into service. In fact, some of them aren't even totally put into service yet, the littoral combat ships. How much confidence do you have in the analysis that these things just aren't fit for the fight?
I'm very confident, Chairman. Again, I think you hit the nail on the head there. We're looking to acquire capabilities that are relevant in the future fight and survivable. The earlier variants of this the ship that you mentioned did not live up to expectations. It's very expensive to maintain, and so we've made the decision that it'd be better to decommission those ships and invest those resources in acquiring capabilities that are more agile and more relevant to the future fight and more survivable.
And those ships have been on the books for, like I said, they're not, I think there's still some in process, but they were designed, what, 20 years ago, 15 years ago? Do you know offhand?
I think it was about 20 years ago, Senator.
About 20 years ago, and it's already changed in 20 years, and pretty dramatically, I might add. I want to talk a little bit about something that's already been visited about, and that's accountability. There's been $3.7 billion spent on a supplemental so far. That's a lot of money. And there's another 16.4 projected to go out. You had said with earlier questions that you're reasonably confident that the weaponry is getting to the Ukrainians, and I get it. You don't have people on the ground there to be able to monitor everything. But the question is, is that, are we making sure that, number one, none of these weapons are falling into the wrong hands? Is there any way to even do that? And then number two, are we making sure that the taxpayer dollars that are being spent are actually making a difference? And I'm talking a significant difference.
Well, first of all, I think they are making a difference, Chairman. And, just look at the battlefield today versus what we were looking at a couple of weeks ago. We see that the Russians the Ukrainians have defeated the Russians around Kyiv, and they've moved back. They're focused on the south and east now. And we expect that to be a bit of a different flavor of fight that employs more long-range fires, a bit more maneuver. And the Ukrainians have asked for what they believe is relevant in that fight. And the department and the Joint Staff under the chairman's leadership there have really hustled to get the capabilities to them as quickly as possible. And we've engaged other countries to do the same, to provide additional capability. But in terms of accountability, we have to depend on the Ukrainians at this point to do the right thing and make sure that they're prudent and careful about how they issue these weapons out and account for these weapons. Again, I engaged the very senior leadership in the country on this issue, and they assured me that this is something that's important and that they'll continue to focus on.
For resupplying, there's a lot of stories about coal production lines, about the fact that we have supply chain issues when it comes to replacing everything that we're shipping into Ukraine, and our allies are shipping into Ukraine too. You said you thought, and don't let me put words in your mouth, that the weaponry could be replaced within the next year with this budget.
All of it won't be replaced within a year. We'll see production lines operate at different speeds, just based upon what they are. We were optimistic about the Javelin the industry being able to increase the production rate in a very meaningful way, and there are decisions to be made about on the Stinger going forward. But in every case, industry has leaned into this and is willing to work with us to increase production as much as possible.
And the dollars in this budget accomplish getting those production lines up, and it accomplishes getting what we need to replace what's being utilized.
And the supplemental that we've asked you for, right, Senator.
Okay. In the opening statements, and this is for you, General Milley, I believe asking for $130 billion in R&D spending. That's $10 billion over 2022, $12 billion over the previous year. Procurement, conversely, is flat at about $144 billion. For years, R&D has been used in mature and prototype technologies like AI, like hypersonics, which are important if we're gonna compete, particularly with China. So when will they become real programs and widely fielded? My concern is that we're prototyping everything to death and it never gets to the field. Is this a concern you have, number one, General? And number two, can you give me any sort of expectations when we might see some of this stuff come to reality?
I think the time window, and again, I agree with your comment about predicting 10, 15 years out, but we do know the broad outlines, or at least we think we know the broad outlines of the future operating environment in this changing character of war. And these programs will need to be online, fielded, in the hands of the force, in the hands of the joint force, inside of 10 years, if we are going to have an opportunity to be superior to our adversaries, specifically China. The programs I'm specifically talking about are artificial intelligence, robotics, hypersonics. There's a wide variety of these technologies that are coming online. But in addition to that, it's more than just the technologies. The joint warfighter concept, we have to get that on the street. We've got to make sure that our organizations, our doctrines, and our talent management are all adjusted. We've got to shift this military from its current state that we're in, and we have to bias the future. We have to make some predictions, as risky as that can be, as to what warfare will look like in the 2030s and 2040s, and we've got to move this organization in that direction. If we fail to do that, we'll be condemning generations to come to be on the losing side of a war. We can do it. We're capable of doing it. This budget puts us on that path.
Okay, and so that's good to know. That's good enough. One last question, then I'll let you guys go. Mr. Secretary, the 2022 National Defense Strategy, it does continue to highlight China as our most consequential strategic competitor and pacing challenge. Is the Russian invasion of Ukraine caused you to rethink the department's priorities laid out in the NDS? And will that have budget implications if the answer is yes?
It is not, Chairman. As you look at the strategy, you see we characterize Russia as an acute threat. And the capabilities that we're going after to support our competition with China are very, very relevant to what we're seeing and potentially will have to do in an extreme case with respect to Russia. And we're part of the strongest alliance in the world with NATO. It's not only our capability that's relevant there, but it's also the capability of all of our allies. So what we're going after is relevant to both areas of competition.
Thank you both. I just want to acknowledge that Senator Shelby's statement will be a part of the record, and let him know that we missed him here today, and we look forward for him to return very, very soon. Everybody has theories. Everybody has 20/20 hindsight, and I can tell you just as a statement for the record, some can say that the pullout of Afghanistan was a mistake. I think it was a decision that had to be made that, quite frankly, can be questioned either way. If we'd left troops there, it would have been questioned. If we'd have pulled out troops, we could be questioned. But to say that Putin invaded Ukraine because of the pullout of Afghanistan is the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. It was just his theory, so I got mine. I think the reason Putin invaded Ukraine is because President Trump empowered him to do such. I don't expect a response from you guys on that, but this is absolutely ridiculous. I want to, once again, appreciate your guys' testimony here today. Senators may submit additional written questions, and we ask that you respond to them in a reasonable period of time, in other words, as quick as you can. This Defense Subcommittee will reconvene on Tuesday, May 10th at 10 a.m. to hear from the Secretary of the Army and the Army Chief of Staff. This committee stands in recess.